Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. We were all late up on Sunday night and very, very happy this week. This guy is a quasi-member of the Ravens organization. He blogs and tweets and does cool podcasts up at BaltimoreRavens.com. I know him as one of my many mentors at the Baltimore Sun. These many years ago. He hates when I bring up how long ago. But, John, I'm wearing my Sports First pin here today, so that will date just how far back I go on the top of my curio hat. But I've got a great story for you. John Eisenberg joining us here, of course, Be More Eisenberg, and you can find him out at the Ravens. John, I took bye week. I left from Seattle, and for the first time in my life, my wife survived twice, we made it to Hawaii. So we went to Hawaii during bye week, and we flew into Honolulu on Monday and spent 2 days in Waikiki and the North Shore and like that. And on Wednesday, we flew over to Maui. We went right to the hotel. We checked in. There was construction at the pool. You couldn't hear anything but jackhammers. And I found one little area where there was a waterfall by the pool. And I saw this big, muscular guy, good-looking guy, playing with a 5-6-year-old boy in the pool. And I thought, oh, that's nice. Father and son on vacation. He turns around. John, I looked at him. I said, that looks like Kyle Bowler. And then I got closer, and I turned around, and I did 3 angles on him, and I went back to my wife, and I said, that's Kyle Bowler in the pool. I went over, I yelled, Kyle. He turned around, he's like, Nestor, what's going on? I did Eisenberg's podcast 2 weeks ago. So there you have it, John. How about it?
Well, was he happy with it?
Yes, very. So much so that his wife, when introduced to me, said, oh, Kyle just did a thing with the Ravens on their website a few weeks ago. So she had checked it out as well. So with that, I would say that your impact is being felt in the 50th state, out in the middle of the Pacific. You were a topic of conversation on Maui last week. So there, have at it, John Eisenberg. Beat that story.
Well, I'm sorry I wasn't on location to, bridge your conversation there with Kyle, but that wouldn't have been a bad little trip. But
hey, man, everywhere I go, I take a little piece of you with me. What can I say, right?
Good to hear it.
Aftermath of all of this, and we'll get to all of your series with Peter Boulware and Jermaine Lewis and Gary Baxter, and you got one coming up with Matt Burke this week. But what a story this is, right? Like in the aftermath of me writing the Dear Joe letter of Joe Flacco being my favorite athlete, and I think you and I had a heck of a conversation about that back in the spring about Joe Flacco. Here then comes the next big thing, right? And on a night where there's John Ogden in a gold jacket, and there's Ed Reed getting a ring, and there's Ray Lewis, we have this, at least for now, Fernando Mania has come here to Baltimore, right?
Fernando Mania. Yeah, to some degree, I think so. And, it really is just a question of when are you getting on this bandwagon? I'm sure there's still some people that are wondering. I mean, the Ravens are now 6-2. That was a great win. A great couple of wins here. And it's like, well, he's not a classic pocket passer. He's only started 15 games. He's just a kid. Can he be consistent? Of course, you can always come up with questions. But for me, after the Seattle and New England games, I would say, what are you waiting for? Because it's quite clear that the NFL, something is happening here, something big. And, if he can stay healthy, the Ravens have something going. And it's pretty serious stuff. The NFL doesn't really know what to do with Lamar Jackson. I'm sure they'll scheme it up at some point, but he's really a super talented young man. And what's really great is he's also just a super guy. Really, certainly the people inside the walls of the organization just down on their knees hoping he doesn't ever change, because he's really got a lot of very attractive qualities that make him just a nice kid. So it's pretty exciting to watch. And, did you notice at the game, the fans didn't leave. The fans didn't leave. They stayed to the end of that game because, how many times do you go out to a ball game and watch your team just obliterate the New England Patriots? So that was a lot of fun for a lot of people.
Yeah, watching Tommy do the walk of shame at the end of the night was kind of fun as well. John Eisenberg here. Be more Eisenberg. You can follow him out at Ravens.com. He's doing a great thing with Matt Burke, one of my favorites this week, so we'll catch him. Maybe I'll run into Matt Burke in Tokyo in a couple of weeks. I don't know. That things are possible. Yeah, talking about Bowler and talking about Flacco and where we are with Lamar, and it took me to get Greg. I talked to Greg Bedard from Boston Sports Journal, and it just occurred to me, and this is something I've never said and I've never really thought much about, but we call him an athlete, and we say they're all athletes and athlete. That's what we hear about for all these guys. And then there's Joe Flacco or Kyle Bowler or any other quarterback, Tom Brady, who comes out to the podium at the end of a game, and they just look withered. They look tired. Even in victory, Joe looked like he needed to go home and sleep 10 hours. Then there's the part where Lamar Jackson runs around, gets tackled, sprints forward, runs out of bounds, hook slides, gets sacked, dives in the piles, does all of this stuff. And that's on first and second down. Then third down, gets back in the huddle, calls another play, and then delivers, back shoulder to Mark Andrews down the field to sort of slit your throat. It's amazing to me what kind of an athlete he is, because in the fourth quarter, everybody else on the field's tired, and somehow the Ravens bring out the Gus Bus and Mark Ingram and, shove a 9-minute drive down your throat in the fourth quarter. That's starting to become a little bit of a standard. That sort of like a Ric Flair's figure four at the end. The figure four for the Ravens is give him the ball with 11 minutes left to go, and then you got to go try to chase Lamar because he's in better shape than everybody else. And I guess maybe it's taken me 10 weeks here this year to figure that part of it out, that he's a little bit of an energizer bunny.
I think the New England, certainly the ones I spoke to and sat next to last night, the New England writers, it was interesting their take on it, and just observing, and they were certainly impressed. I thought the Patriots actually played Lamar about as well as anybody has played him, just in terms of they had a plan. There is no doubt. They mixed up their coverages, their fronts, all sorts of things. They had a spy, and what they really did was very carefully, I think, they didn't go crazy on those edge rushes. So they sort of contained him. If you look at some of those called runs or the called passes, he didn't get to that edge a whole lot. The Patriots, not surprisingly, with a lot of discipline on how they approached Lamar.
Well, 16 carries and 61 yards. You did a pretty good job on Lamar Jackson.
You did.
He never got loose on you, literally.
But did they corral him? No. And why did they not corral him? Number one, he beat him with his arm in a lot of ways. He made a lot of big throws. Plus, half a dozen times in that game, it was third down or whatever, and he would make a run, and they would be on a drive, and he would, get to a point where he's taken on a defender and just go right by him and still get with the first down that they needed. He just did it time and again. And so it really does beg the question. They did a pretty good job on him, and yet he's still, they came in averaging, giving up 7 points a game or whatever, and the Ravens put 37 on him. It really does beg the question, who's going to stop this? Because right now, it's really tough. He's just got a different gear than these defenses have seen.
I know you've been around a lot of teams. I've been around a lot of teams. You've written about Super Bowl winning teams, so have I. This young group of players, and I'm on the road, and I know you haven't been traveling as much, but this year I was in Kansas City even after they lost, and you've been in that tiny little locker room there at Arrowhead that was built in 1970 that hasn't been updated since, and I think Clark Hunt came in and took all the stools out of there as well. Even in that sort of a cramped locker room where they just lost, and there was a lot of emotion, it feels like nobody's in a hurry to get in the shower. Nobody's in a hurry to leave. They all sort of sit around and mill and talk amongst each other. They're always talking football. Matter of fact, in postgame, I almost feel a little awkward in there because they're always in conversations with each other. You almost have to get in the middle of them to grab a player to get some comments because they're talking football amongst themselves. Then there's the part that impressed me so much, which was the counter punch that New England threw at them on a young team, and I asked John Harbaugh in the aftermath about that on Sunday night, which was, it went from 17-0 to 17-13 really, really quickly, and it was only 17-13 because they ran out of time, literally, at the 2-minute warning. It would have been 17-17. That happened very, very quickly, and yet the Ravens just came out and punched in the second half in a way that That's the most impressive part for me, is that they answered what I was going to say to John Harbaugh, his brother-in-law, being a college basketball coach, the run. They answered the run in the second quarter.
Yeah, they did. I would agree with you. That was more. I mean, the beginning was certainly impressive. I mean, they literally almost just blew the Patriots out of the stadium at the beginning of that game. If Cyrus Jones doesn't fumble that punt, it's 17-0. The Ravens have the ball again. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? The Patriots, did they have a first down at that point? Maybe one, and they had punted, and the Ravens had scored on a 3-play drive. I think the prior time they were just not. It was a knockout. It was almost a knockout. So they let them back in the game, and I wrote.
And then knocked them out again. That's what made him.
yeah. Then I mean that's normally a cardinal sin. You do not let the Patriots of any team back in the game. I will say this: the Patriots, uncharacteristically, and this was surprising, were quite charitable with a lot of mistakes, mental mistakes, physical mistakes, penalties that extended drives. Certainly, the one at the first drive of the game was a 4-point offside penalty when they line up for a field goal. Instead, they get a touchdown. Certainly, the fumble that was returned for a touchdown later on.
The McCourty penalty, that drive was over with, and they were getting the ball back with 8 minutes left to go. Instead, they sort of kind of never got the ball back.
They helped, but it's the biggest thing that happened was the Ravens controlled the line of scrimmage, and they've done that 2 weeks in a row. By the way, Lamar's getting all the headlines. The offensive line is really playing. And we didn't know how that was going to turn out this year. They didn't know who the left guard was. Got some young players. Knew Yonda was pretty good. Not sure about the center. Well, they're playing great football. I mean, they mauled the Patriots in that game, and so that's impressive. That's a good physical defensive front, and so that just came to the fore in the final quarter, and that is how John Harbaugh loves to play. It is how he has always loved to play. That is not a new MO of wanting to run out the clock with your running game at the end. And now they have the horses to do it, and the quarterback that can make it happen. So it's a great way to play on the road for sure, but it works just as well as at home too.
John Eisenberg, be more Eisenberg. You can find him out at Baltimore Ravens. He's doing a big thing with Matt Burke this week. I would think that Matt Burke approves of Matt Skura blowing guys up down the left side out in the running game. And you talk about the offensive line and Marshall Yonda pile driving Eric DeCosta after the game in the locker room. And the offensive linemen are infectious about this, right? Like, this is fun for them. And then there's the part where the personnel part and Eric DeCosta decides to make Nick Boyle a part of this and give Willie Snead an extension. And these guys who, it says tight end, it says wide receiver, it might as well say blocker, because everyone that they've drafted this side of Hollywood Brown, it wants to literally put their shoulder pads into you, including Patrick Ricard, right?
Yes. I mean, look at the guys they've extended. That part of it. This may be a new look Ravens, but it's old school in terms of wanting to be physical. And they are very much that. They're physical on the other side of the ball, too, mainly up front with Michael Pearson, Brandon Williams. Not easy to get past those guys. And they certainly just wear an offensive line down, by the way. It's another thing that they do. Even if they're giving up some runs, you're going to put your shoulder into 700 pounds of beef right there, 65 times. By the fourth quarter, you're beat, and it's no secret. The Ravens they were getting to Tom Brady, really the whole game, but certainly at the end, it forced an interception with a pass rush, and it's a physical style of play, and that remains signature Ray. That part is unchanged. That's probably one of the few things. Things changed. I found it very, very interesting. Certainly, anyone with any sort of long view of this franchise, you got Ed and Ray there, and they're the stadium camera showing them, and we're exhorting them. That's the old school Ravens, that defense. And what are they thinking as they're watching? They're thinking, boy, number one, they're thinking, I wish we'd had an offense like that when I was playing. And number two is, I'm glad I don't have to play that, because football is changing. I don't think it's any fun for any defender to go out there and try to run that guy down.
John, we've all felt the home field advantage. You felt that press box shake. I certainly felt the upper deck shake through the years, and we haven't played a whole lot of big January games around here, but regular season games. Man, when Billick came out of the tunnel, you know of my close relationship with Brian and our partnership for Living Classrooms that we've had here for a dozen years and our friendship for 2 decades. I was not prepared for the hair on the back of my neck to stand up last month when he came out and held the trophy up. Here's the trophy. This is... And I realized, other than, on the parade, they never do that. And then I went out to Seattle, and I saw Mike McCready from Pearl Jam raise their 12th man, and I saw what that does. And I see Ed Reed come out there with that Tonka toy, whatever the hell that shield thing is. And I'm thinking to myself, if Ed Reed had held the Lombardi Trophy up, if Matt Burke comes back and holds it, if Anquan Bolden 2 weeks ago had held the Lombardi Trophy, if, I don't know, Mike Flynn, Edwin Mulatalo, whoever it is comes back and holds it, there's something about the trophy, and there's something about the fans, and there's something about the atmosphere. And you pointed out the jackets on Ray Lewis and Ed Reed getting the ring, that this franchise, and you go back as far as I do, where the stadium we sat in on Sunday night was a parking lot and it was a baseball town, that the Ravens have really done something special here, and now they've redone this thing a third time. There's a reset here with Harbaugh and with DaCosta and Lamar and where they are, and a few holdovers, a few Yondas, a few Cooks, a few Justin Tuckers, and a handful of other guys from the old era. But even the Fantennial they had a couple of weeks ago, what a rich thing that they've done here, and now giving the city a winner while the Orioles are going to lose 100 games again. It feels like the Purple Flamingos are back on the lawn, but it is really another era when you look down and Ogden, Lewis, and Reed are wearing those jackets, and you see the highlights, and you're like, man, that Ed Reed return, that was just a couple nights ago, right? It was 16 years ago now. And the time starts to get, but what a rich franchise. And I think everything that they can trade off of, including the trophies and the parades and the heroes and the Hall of Famers, all of that, it's now their time to capitalize on what they didn't have when it was Joe Ehrman and, Lenny Moore and those guys standing on the sidelines 20 years ago.
Well, history is, and I've certainly written this on the website. I mean, history is what makes a franchise in the long run. I mean, that's what separates you. If you have a history, a story to tell, narrative, famous people, I mean, it's what gives you substance as a sports franchise. It's the difference between the Ravens and, some hockey NHL team that, has never gone past the first round and has a hard time cultivating fans, and there just aren't that many memories. That's what you need. And yes, it's all about the money these days in sports, but you're not going to go anywhere if you don't build a winning product, a consistent winner, and give your fans some history. And the Ravens haven't been around that long, and it certainly makes it an uphill battle. They're not going to have as many fans, even succeeding more than some of these teams like the Redskins. I mean, they just do not have as many fans because they haven't been around as long. That is just an immutable fact. There is no way around it. These teams that go back 6-7 decades just have too much going for them. But in a very short period of time, the Ravens have fought the good fight and really built a very, very nice history here with on-field team success, individual success, drafting, strong personalities. I mean, it is never boring. And so it's great. It's great stuff. It's fun. I've been writing sports in this town since the 80s, and it's an unbelievable addition of the people here. Do they take it for granted sometimes? Yeah, sure. And whatever, that comes and goes. But the reality is it's a wonderful addition to the sports here, and just a great thing. And it looks like it's going to be the gift that keeps on giving in the near future here, which is a lot of fun.
We talk about memories, right? And wherever you were watching the Seattle game, I was out there 2 weeks ago. That was a hell of a thing. I mean, that was where it caught fire. Then there's a bye week. Everyone right now remembers Sunday night. So even the young people, the people new to the bandwagon, you've been in the stadium. You see that the fans have changed, and the fans that come to games don't come to all the games anymore. It's not like church anymore on a Sunday. but making memories. Boy, remember that Sunday night when they beat Tom Brady up when he was 42? Yeah, I was there, right? And there is a little part of that we take with us here this week, because this is as good as it gets when you beat Tom Brady and you're 6-2 and feeling good, and you got the hottest young player, and you got the next Ray Lewis, the next great player. This is some heady times here. It's almost like you can't wait till Sunday, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a wonderful thing. I mean, I have vivid memories of that first Super Bowl run, the 2000. I remember the regular season games towards the end of that year. I remember the Dallas Cowboys, my childhood team, came in here. I believe that was the year, and they came in with Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, all of them, right? The triplets, and they played the Ravens, and the Cowboys were starting to head down the slope at that point. The final score, I don't know if it was 30-0 or something. They could have played 10 quarters. The Cowboys were not going to score. And I remember that. I remember the loud noise in the stadium. And I believe it was the last regular season game of that year. They played the Jets, right? And there was all this crazy stuff going on, returns for touchdowns, and the Ravens were putting up points, and you did get the feeling that, wow. I mean, and of course, that was a city that had been starved for any football for a long time, much less winning football. And so here it is suddenly, and it's like, wow, this is cool, and people are into it. And I get a little bit of the same vibe the other night. It's like, you may remember this. You are going to remember this. And especially if they go on to do something here. The night Brady came into town and just got spanked. That doesn't happen very often. That is a memory. And yes, you kind of know that as it's happening. I certainly did. This has the potential to be some pretty special stuff.
John Eisenberg is our guest. He is Be More Eisenberg. His Matt Burke podcast runs this week, and catching up with Matt Burke and whatever happened to that guy, and Kyle Bowler and Peter Boulware and Gary Baxter. You can go find all that. Jermaine Lewis as well at BaltimoreRavens.com. All right, so I want to suspend all football conversation and take on the big boy pants here of our long-term relationship. John, I don't know if you know, but Washington got a baseball team, and they just had a parade. And man, oh man, oh man. I've known you a long time, and it really took me to watching a little bit of the parade on Saturday. I watched 10 minutes of it, and FP Santangelo and others on the the Mr. Angelos and Sons Network. I remember that baseball was never going to work, and it wasn't a baseball town. And Dan, in Washington ain't a baseball town, John. Ain't no way they're going to support baseball. And here we are, 15 years later. We're going to lose 100 games, and they're never, ever coming back. They're never going to want to come back. And now people around here are going to want to go down there because they have a real baseball team and a real thing going on. You talk about making memories. They made a few over the last month. After a decade of losing all those big games, they finally climbed the mountain and did it with Zimmerman and did it with Strasburg and did it with all those guys that had failed before, other than Bryce Harper, who they didn't want anymore. I don't know what is going to happen with our baseball franchise, but I am gravely, gravely concerned as a citizen as to, I would go as far as to say malfeasance, but I won't take it that far, as to whatever the mismanagement over the last quarter of a century. This is something that I never ever thought the Washington Nationals were going to have a parade. Like I never thought we were going to have one, but I never thought they were going to have one. And now that they've had one, I am gravely concerned as to what it means to our city, our franchise, the future of the franchise, where the money is and where the money will be. This is the worst nightmare. They're the Yankees. We're the Mets.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if, the Baltimore fans, I mean, it goes back to what I said before with, like, the Redskins. These teams that have been around a while do have more substance, more history, more things to hold on to. Does that help them in cultivating new fans? Not necessarily. Young fans, not necessarily. Are they going to, like the Nats because the Nats won? Sure, there's going to be some people. But I do think that the Orioles, and for the record, by the way, I am watching. I'm not around this team. I'm in the castle all the time. I do watch. I'm an avid fan. I've written 2 books about them, and I do keep tabs on it. And, I'm very interested to see what they're doing with Elias and these guys. I mean, they were way behind. The biggest problem for this team is they were way behind in terms of sort of how modern baseball is unfolding now. And so that's in terms of scouting internationally, using analytics, fundamental stuff. It is amazing they were as good as they were for as long as they were in the Buck years, because they were really giving up ground on those crucial things, and for a long time. They're finally doing it, and they don't have the horses now. Well, I don't know. There are smart people. There are smart people over there now, and I have no idea whether it's going to work out. And certainly, it's very easy to step up and say no, it won't, because it's a long-term process. I am willing to give them the benefit of the doubt in terms of, okay, let's see. I think looks like they drafted a great player, the catcher, and go forward. See what happens. Will that bring fans back? I don't know. But I do think, it's impossible. I don't know how many Baltimore fans, young Baltimore fans, are going to go down to the Nats. Maybe some, but...
But if you go back to 3.6 million people in our city, 20, and I know it feels like 25 minutes ago was 25 years ago, but Camden Yards was built, and I've done a little bit of research on this 30 years later, with the notion that Washington was never going to get a team. Like the whole notion that the state of Maryland, that the people of Rockville and Gaithersburg and Upper Marlboro were going to fund Camden Yards meant that They were paying for it. They were going to enjoy it. It was built at the foot of the city off of 95, so Washington could enjoy it. All those conversations with Angelos back in the 90s of, we don't think Washington should have a team because look at what it did in the Bay Area and all. And now we're entering an era where they're going to be the rich team and we're going to be the poor team, and they're going to have a bigger market. We're going to have a smaller market. And whenever the Masson thing really gets divorced and the next owner comes in, we're going to have a special baseball owner around here to put the CPR necessary into the franchise's business in making people with real money care about the team, because those 3.6 million people back in the day, John, that money all drifted up from D.C., and that pipeline of revenue is no longer coming anymore, ever.
Yeah, I remember wasn't too long ago, I was on a road trip with the Ravens. We were in Dallas, my old hometown, and I was standing on the floor of that stadium, the new stadium that Jerry built with Dick Cass, the president of the Ravens. And, of course, he was Jerry's lawyer. A lot of people don't know this. He was Jerry's lawyer when he bought the Cowboys. And Dick is a real inside creature of the NFL. And we were looking at that stadium down there with the lights. It's before the game, the lights are going, and everything's blinking and flashing. You feel like you're in Times Square, and there's 500 boxes. And he looked around, and Dick goes, we just don't have wealth like this in Baltimore. And, they've done a pretty good job here. The Ravens have of filling that stadium, keeping those boxes sold. There's only so much you can do. So it's an interesting question. The football team has managed to do it. But, of course, they have more revenue sharing, and it's a different scene in the NFL.
Well, the football team's also siphoning off the baseball team, which didn't exist in the beginning. When it was in the beginning, it was all going to the Orioles. And once they had to start fighting for it, they haven't done a very good job. And you know that, and I know that. I don't know where. I keep asking the question, John, where's the money coming from to save the baseball team? Who will be? I'm not going to give them money. I'm not giving them any money. And I know a lot of people that don't give them money. That's the thing that really concerns me with 23 months left on this lease, because in the old days, you at the Baltimore Sun, Ken Rosenthal, Jack Gibbons, we'd have been pitbulling it. I don't see anybody pitbulling other than me what's going on behind the scenes with a lease that is dangling right now for this franchise, literally dangling at a time when the Nationals are holding parades and the Orioles look like they can't get up and crawl yet.
Well, of course, this is a very similar situation to, when was this? The late 80s. And back then, people said, Edward Bennett Williams is going to move him to Washington. And I remember writing columns about it then. Is the baseball team going to leave? And it was saved by a new signed lease, the new stadium. What will happen this time? I have no idea. I cannot begin to tell you. I do not believe this team will leave Baltimore. I do not believe it. I will believe that when I see it.
I think he needs to be supported while it's here, though, and that's the part that concerns me. The question I will ask is who will support it, not if they're leaving, because if no one supports it, they will leave. That much is clear. There's no 30-year lease coming around the corner. Governor Schaefer's not coming out with fresh ink on a contract and saying the Orioles are here through 2050.
Right.
That's not happening. I know that much.
Well, we'll see. I mean, fans like winners. And they will support winners, and certainly, I mean, the Nats. I don't know how many fans do they. I mean, they drew a lot of fans. What are they drawing down there?
Well, more next year than they did this year.
yeah, that's for sure.
Hey, man, it was $20 to get in to see him play the Brewers 3 weeks ago. I almost went down there on a Monday night for a playoff game, but $20 for a playoff game, $1,500 for World Series tickets. It is certainly the flavor of the month. John Eisenberg's not the flavor of the month. He's here forever. You can find him at B. Eisenberg at BaltimoreRavens.com. This week it's all Matt Burke, and it's all the first place Baltimore Ravens. John, rest up, towel off. We got a long season ahead.
Just halfway through. We're just getting started.
See you soon. John Eisenberg, Be More Eisenberg, out on Twitter and at Baltimore Ravens. You can find me out in the Buy a Toyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear. Big week, Luke's and Owings Mills. We're going to Cincinnati, and I will be recapping all things Nationals parade and what it means for Baltimore. I'll also be writing about that this week. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Lamar and Ravens fever.